Okay, let's get this show on the road. The history of Israel. We've got to go back to the late 19th century, literally the end of the 19th century, 1899, when the House of Rothschild, the wealthiest family in the world and most powerful, created the Zionist Federation of Great Britain and Ireland. Specifically, the member of the family was Lord Walter Rothschild, who was based in England. And the idea of the Zionist Federation was twofold. Firstly, they wanted to kind of reinvent Judaism, which was quite interesting, really, because the Zionist Federation was secular, meaning it wasn't religious; it was a political movement. The second goal of the Federation was to create a homeland for the Jews in Palestine. Now, Jerusalem was considered the Holy Land by the Jews, but not the homeland. And there were a lot of Jews kind of resisted the Zionist Federation because, according to Jewish scripture, the Jews will get their homeland when the Messiah returns, not when the House of Rothschild says so. But anyway, the House of Rothschild used pressure, a lot of propaganda. They used the power of the press, even in those days, to persuade Jews to become Zionists. If you're a Jew and you weren't a Zionist, you were labeled as a Jew hater, you see. They invented the phrase self-hating Jew, and it almost became a stigmatism. If you didn't support the Zionist Federation, then you were outcast. So then we move on to 1914. Germany declares war on Russia, which triggers World War One. France is allied with Russia, so they join in. Germany decides to attack France first, so it comes through Belgium to get France from the south. Britain had an agreement with Belgium, so Britain then felt obliged to join in. So grew World War One. The thing is, though, by the end of 1916, the Germans had won. They'd won the war. The Russians had lost the will to fight. The French economy was destroyed. The British economy was destroyed. Germany was set to basically rule the whole of Europe, the European mainland at least. So what happened then is Lord Walter Rothschild shows his head again, and he comes to see the British Prime Minister, and he says, we're going to do you two big favours. First of all, my wealthy family will lend you the money to continue the fight against the Germans. We'll fix your economy, and you can go and thrash them, but you ain't going to thrash the Germans by yourself. We'll give you the money, but you've not got the wherewithal to do it. Now, we've got powerful friends in Washington, D.C., says Lord Rothschild, and we can persuade America to join the war and fight alongside you. Now, with America and financial help from us, you can defeat the Germans. You don't do it, the Germans are going to take over Europe. So the British Prime Minister, it was a guy called Asquith at the time, he kind of felt obliged to accept the deal. The Lord Rothschild then makes it clear that, well, we're not doing this favour for you for nothing. There's no such thing as a free lunch. We want something from you. Oh, yeah, says Asquith. What would that be? He says, well, you're going to send an armada of naval ships across to the eastern Mediterranean, and you're going to take Palestine for us, for the Zionist Federation. Now, Palestine at the time was ruled by the Ottoman Empire, which really means Turkey. Lo and behold, 1917, April 1917, America joins the war. So the Rothschilds had fulfilled their promises. And by November of 1917, it was time for the British to return the favour. And what they did, the British Foreign Secretary, a guy called Arthur Balfour, he wrote a public letter to Lord Rothschild, stating Britain's intention to help the Zionist Federation and help the Jews create their home state in Palestine. Now, some people at that time may have thought, what the hell gives the British the right to decide what's going to happen to a foreign land that doesn't even belong to them? But let's face it, the British were quite good at colonising places at that point. I mean, they'd already taken Australia, New Zealand, India, the Caribbean, the West Indies, Canada, the United States. So, I mean, taking Palestine from the Ottoman Empire was going to be no big deal. And lo and behold, that same month, in November, over the Royal Navy go to the Eastern Mediterranean, and they take Palestine. Interestingly, the way they took Palestine was on the cover of night. They went ashore onto the beach from their ships, and they laid out on the beach. They littered the beach with crates of opium and hashish. Then they sneaked off that back to the boats and waited for the Turkish defenders of Palestine to get shit-faced, basically. And then the British were able to come ashore and basically take Palestine for themselves. Yeah, they took prisoner all the Turkish soldiers, and then they set up office themselves. All of a sudden, Palestine was British. Job done. Now, almost immediately, the Jews from various parts were persuaded to emigrate to Palestine. The indigenous population in Palestine at the time was something like 40% Muslims, 40% Christians, and 20% Jews. That was the indigenous that were there. Okay. When the immigrants arrived, the Jewish immigrants arrived, it was all very nice at first because they came along with money. They'd been given financial assistance by the House of Rothschild. Bear that in mind, the richest family in the world. They wanted to create this homeland, so they were giving people money, persuading them, they were bribing them to actually move to Palestine. So these Jews arrived, and they had money. They bought properties, they bought land, like any immigrant would. That's fine. But the immigration carried on, and there was there ended up being thousands, and eventually like tens of thousands of Jews arriving, and things were getting a little bit tetchy. And the Palestinians had been made aware of this letter written by Arthur Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary. That letter became known as the Balfour Declaration, which basically said that the UK was going to help set up a Jewish state in Palestine. Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Yeah, right. Or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. That's it. Now, we have to remember that this was written by the British government, who had no business in Palestine, and it was addressed to Lord Walter Rothschild, who had no business in Palestine. So the more and more Jews arrived, the more pissed off the indigenous people got, and trouble kicked off, and there was squabbling and fighting between the Palestinians and the Jews, and between the Jews and the Palestinians, and things were really starting to get out of hand by the time the end of World War II came around. In fact, in 1948, things were so bad that the United Nations, which had been formed by the House of Rothschild following World War II, an appeal was made to them as to what the hell are we going to do with this mess that's happened in Palestine. Now, because the United Nations was owned by the Rothschilds, and the Zionist Federation was a Rothschild project, the United Nations obviously voted in favour of helping out the Jews. So what they said, what the United Nations resolution at the time said, is okay, the British can clear 56% of the land for the Jews, but the remaining 44% of the land has to go to the indigenous population, the Palestinians. Now, At that time, that itself wasn't really very fair because there were twice as many Palestinians as there were immigrant Jews. So to give more than half the land to the Jews, But anyway, the British went ahead and helped the Zionist regime there to clear the land, and they ended up displacing an incredible 750,000 Palestinians. Now, when I say displaced, displaced is such a kind of gentle, benign word, but it isn't a gentle, benign pastime, because what it means is they were turfing people out of their homes and kicking them off their land. And those 750,000 Palestinians became refugees. They ended up living in tents. Not only that, but the British ended up clearing 80% of the land for the Jews, not 56%. Now, the United Nations started wagging their finger at the British, but the British went, yeah, fuck you. Didn't do anything about it. The United Nations didn't do anything about it, although they were vocal about the fact that they'd actually gone above and beyond the agreement. But yeah, so that was the first displacement of the Palestinians, an enormous amount. There were 15,000 Palestinians killed in the process, and that became known by the Palestinians as the Nakba. Nakba means catastrophe. Yeah, and we can see here, this is a map of the area that was actually occupied by the Palestinians before the British arrived, and this is a map of the land occupied by the Palestinians after the Nakba, and you see how much land that the Palestinians lost. Now, it's important to note at this point that now we're after World War II. More specifically, we're after the Holocaust. And the Holocaust worked very much in the favour of the Zionists. Firstly, it left a lot of Jews displaced across the whole of Europe, and they were easy to persuade to move to Palestine. And secondly, because of the mistreatment of the Jews by the Nazis during World War II, everybody had total sympathy for the Jews. The phrase anti-Semitism became very popular. If you spoke out and said anything against the Jews, then you were an anti-Semite. You were a Nazi. Yeah, countries enforced laws against anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. I mean, people went to prison for Holocaust denial. So it meant that the Zionists could pretty much get away with anything, and nobody would speak out. And so that is what happened. Now, the other major part in this brief history of Israel is that after the Nakba, the great displacement of the Palestinians in Palestine, the Zionists set up their government and they declared the existence of the State of Israel. Now, for them to declare the State of Israel wasn't much, but a mere 12 hours later, the US President Truman, did a speech at the United Nations in which he referred to the State of Israel. And that, by some crazy reckoning, made the State of Israel official. And that is when the troubles really began. And that's as far as I'm going to go in this history. But one of the most important things to realize is a lot of people believe that Israel was created and the Jews settled in the Holy Land as a result of the Holocaust. But as I've explained in this video, that a lot of that happened, the Zionist Federation and all of that happened long before World War II. It had nothing to do with the Holocaust. That was the creation of Israel.